Hello, hello, and welcome to another ohmTown Daily News Show. I am Mayor Watt, and today's episode is titled When Machines Make Humans Work. Today is March 19th, 2023. And the rundown for today's show is that we are going to be talking about UBS reaching a deal. There's volcanoes on Venus. Allergy season is kicking off. A fancy wedding dress, or wedding invite, sorry, not dress. A vlogger, YouTuber, streamer built a tiny home for $6,000. And then somebody else took a shed and turned that into a B&B, or Airbnb. And the Moldovas are trying to rally around themselves to prevent Russia's influence. And what happens when you ask the question, if you can't tell the difference, does it matter? When it comes to humans and machines. Then we have a teleporting ginger cat. And last two articles is Twitter now automatically responds to all press emails with a single poop emoji. And I've actually added another one here late about Silicon Valley Bank once more, and that the Fed had actually paid some attention to it. Let's get into the show. Yeah, I actually walked away. Sorry, I had to do something. The studio door was open, so I had to close it. This is how the sausage is made here in ohmTown. So I am Mayor Watt. That is ohmTown.com, and up there is the artificial intelligence that keeps everything in check when, well, I fall asleep at the wheel. You want to introduce yourself? Say hi.
Good evening, ohmTown citizens.
Yeah, so how's your day been?
My day's been great.
Just kind of hanging out, making sure all of the potholes are getting filled in ohmTown?
That's right.
How many articles do you think you had eyes on today?
That I actually looked at, or how many were in ohmTown?
How many that you scanned through, like the titles that we saw in ohmTown today?
About 40.
Those are submissions.
Okay, that's why I didn't understand. Probably maybe a few hundred. There's usually fewer on the weekend.
Yeah, and particularly Sunday. So, yeah, that's what I thought. So we have quite a few, but we filter it down to 10, 11 tonight. We try to limit it to 10, 11, 12 if I shut up early in the presentation of information, but not today. I blabbed. So at any rate, let's get into today's articles. The very first article is UBS reportedly reaches deal to buy Credit Suisse for more than $2 billion. And that actually has bolstered the stock market futures. So come Monday and the rest of the week, you'll probably see an uptick, and an uptick ultimately in Bitcoin as well, as things stabilize, but people are still leery, kind of worried. But for all intents, I will always think that Bitcoin is one policy away from being nothing in the United States. That said, it's over what I thought it was going to be. Let me make sure what it's at right now. So Bitcoin.
I thought it was around 24,000.
Yeah, today it's right now at 27,000. So it's something that I didn't think was going to happen. It's actually, because it never really stops trading. It's at $27,913. Up today, $728. My main concern with it has always been that it's pegged to the US dollar. So its real value is nothing. That said, I think there's also a limited number of people playing in this at any real level. And a lot of people have been made pseudo billionaires, depending on how many Bitcoin they've had. So the only reason why I brought it up is because Bitcoin continues to increase in the turmoil in the US banking system that actually gets knocked on to other markets because of the interconnectedness of, well, fiat currency banking systems in general. So it'll always be a problem. The way to mitigate this is to have much more competition and much more control over the amount of risk. We'll get into that as we talk about Silicon Valley Bank and the Fed and FDIC as time goes on anyway. So this article is over at marketwatch.com. Steve Goldstein is the author. And here's a picture on this little MarketWatch article that says, from the left is Credit Suisse Chairman Axel Lehmann and UBS Chairman Colm Keller, who seems to be asking, who? Then Swiss Finance Minister Karen Keller-Sutter and Swiss President Alan Berset attend a press conference after talks over Credit Suisse in Bern on Sunday. I'm sorry, is everything okay?
I was just sending you a message concerning lighting.
Oh, right. Yeah, not a problem. So the way that this, and sorry, again, that's how the sausage is made. So the deal was announced by Switzerland's president, Alain Berset, sorry, I got to pronounce it correctly. Flanked by executives from both banks and the chairman of the Swiss National Bank. With the takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS, and that's who's taking it over, a solution has been found to secure financial stability and protect the Swiss economy in this exceptional situation, the SNB said in a statement. So UBS is going to buy Credit Suisse for 3 billion francs, 3.25 billion US dollars, or about 0.76 francs per share in an all-stock deal. So basically everything is shifting in paper over to somebody else's paper, and the assets and the deposits are the collateral for this exchange. So something's going to happen, and I'm going to predict that it's going to be interest rates are going to increase for anybody that has an account. And you're not going to be able to recover as much on your account. Your interest rate for getting interest is going to be lower or nil. So UBS said it benefits from 25 billion francs of downside protection from the transaction to support market or marks. Did you observe anything that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I guess it just seems odd to me that its rival is the one doing the buyout, but maybe that's typically what happens. I don't pay much attention to banking mergers and acquisitions.
So, because everybody really is a competitor in the space, it's a fire sale, just like Silicon Valley Bank is a fire sale for who's taking over Silicon Valley Bank. And we'll end up talking about that at some point. So the deal does not need shareholder approval because it's an emergency acquisition. And all of the assets are protected. The things that are going to be losing money are the investors, the profiteers off of all of the benefit that has happened. They walk away with whatever they've lost if it's still there. But I suspect that there's enough warning that a lot of these investors have bowed out in some way or another. So it says this is a commercial solution and not a bailout, said Karen Keller-Sutter, or Suter. It might be Suter, the Swiss finance minister. Bankruptcy would have been the highest risk, which would have been a shock to the financial system. So I'm sure that UBS was basically voluntold, by this, or everybody's going to suffer. And that's much like what happened with the 2008 collapse. All of the banking institutions that were prominent were told, you all have to take money, because if one doesn't take money, all the rest are going to look like they are getting a bailout. And that's going to be a shock to the system, and you will benefit. So there are several banks that paid back their, what do you want to call it? Their bolstering quicker than others. So, and since then, I think we're heading towards 80 closures of banks since the 2008 collapse. Here in the United States alone, I think that's where we're at. Maybe more than that. I don't remember the number. It's been a while since I looked at the number of collapses, but these are actually quite large, SVB being a concentrated amount of wealth. And it's not really gone. It's going to be broken off into pieces probably, and we'll end up talking about it more as more results come in. Anyway, Credit Suisse has lost money for 5 consecutive quarters, reeling from losses to family office Archegos, as well as having to freeze $10 billion of supply chain funds sold through the bank that were managed by Greensill Capital. So this is all high risk, which would have been high reward had financial prospects not changed. So if things would have remained the same, they would have made literally bank. So this is what happens. And in previous times, I suppose the depositors would have suffered, but here it's firmly being thrown onto the investors, the profiteers. But this stuff needs to stop being made social, a social burden. Yeah, it's being paid into a particular fund, but all of the machinations of this are not being paid. It's not all a private solution. As it says here, where does it say it? It's a commercial solution and not a bailout. Yeah, but all of the machinations that are making this happen are not a commercial solution. This is all government. Now, it's not US, so I can't really say anything about this other than observing it from the outside, saying this is a deal backed by Swiss government, not the Swiss population, not the public. You know, I think some serious punishment needs to be doled out for such a grandiose level of risk. You know, this isn't just, some moderate amount of, what do you want to call it? It isn't that you've failed to pay your taxes once. This is you've impacted the potential of the entire financial sector for a country and knock-on countries.
Yeah,
because everything is tied together.
I also find the country interesting here, right? Because this country has a certain reputation with respect to its banking laws. So I don't know if that facilitated it, but obviously we saw something similar just occur in the US, which has different banking laws.
I think the public pretty much says when you think of banking, you think of Swiss accounts, and that it's a stronghold and almost immune to these type of shenanigans, but apparently not. But I'm willing to bet that there is a concentrated number of banks now, so shenanigans impact at a greater amplitude than previously. If there's only,
Right.
well, yeah, I could barely hear you. It's okay.
We'll try that again.
Yeah, so you said you'd agree?
Oh,
or-
that's probably true, right? If there are fewer banks holding funds, if something goes awry, right, the impact's going to be greater.
Yeah, it's a bigger shock. And just to put it in something a little simpler, there is only a 2 or 3 companies that provide baby food here in the United States. And when one of their plants shut down, 50% of the market fell offline. That's the problem with a lack of competition in the space. Mergers and acquisitions and the failing of meeting the requirements because increased lobbying actually phases out competition that can't keep up. And I can tell you exactly from experience that that's what happens. There are times where a business can lobby for greater protections, greater policy, greater controls. Why? Because they have a strategic advantage in that they're already positioned to facilitate those changes. So all it takes is a policy to come down and they say, okay, not a big deal. We lobbied for it, so we can flip the switch, and they're already protected. But competition is sitting there going, well, we were blindsided. Investors walk away because, well, you're not prepared. Well, unless you're the one that's lobbying and you already have, insiders telling you this is what's happening, you're going to be blindsided. So it just shows that you're a weak business if you're playing the game, versus the reality is very few people are engaged in this game. Others are just trying to run a business or a service. So as I've already mentioned, there have been a dramatic number of bank closures since 2008. That has allowed additional mergers and acquisitions, concentration of wealth, power, influence, to mean that when a bank like SVB or Credit Suisse collapses, its magnitude is massive. So with that in mind, we'll come back to that as time permits throughout the coming weeks until it resolves itself through policy and political changes. Oh, and before I go too far, let me throw this into the chat so that you can follow it. And you can always go to ohmTown.showbot.tv or type in !showbot into the chat here in Twitch. So if you go to twitch.tv/ohmTown, you'll be able to visit us here. And if you're in the chat, you can actually hit !S and provide a URL or a title and or a topic. And we'll include that perhaps in tomorrow's episode, because it'll get thrown into Showbot. So ohmTown.showbot.tv. At any rate, this next article is proof of active volcanoes at last. Venus is almost the same size as Earth at mass and its I wanted to say density, but I said destiny in my head twice. So it should be generating heat in its interior by the decay of radioactive elements, according to this article, at much the same rate that Earth does. On Earth, one of the main ways in which this heat leaks out is via volcanic eruptions, and during an average year, at least 50 volcanoes erupt. Well, apparently, there's photographic evidence. It's a perspective view across, I guess, Mont, M-A-A-T, Mont? I think it's Mont. Mont Mons on Venus based on the Magellan radar data. And what this is actually representing as you look down through this article is that it has clear signs of volcanic eruptions and flow, where the eruption's flow has overlapped other impact craters. So it's definitive that there is volcanic eruptions on Mars. So a new study by geophysicist Robert Herrick. Oh, by the way, let me back up. David Rothery from The Conversation wrote this article, and it's over at phys.org. Again, you can follow the link through ohmTown. All roads lead to ohmTown. So a new study by geophysicist Robert Herrick of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which he reported this week at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Houston and published in the journal Science, has at last caught one of the planet's volcanoes in the act. So not as straightforward to study Venus's surface because it has a dense atmosphere, including an unbroken cloud layer at a height of 45 to 65 kilometers that is opaque to most wavelengths of radiation, including visible light. The only way to get a detailed view of it is of the ground from above the clouds is by radar directed downward from an orbiting spacecraft. So a technique known as aperture synthesis is used to build up an image of the surface. This combines the varying strength of radar echoes bounced back from the ground, including the time delay between transmission and receipt, plus slight shifts in frequency corresponding to whether the spacecraft is getting closer or further. It's redshift, basically. The resulting image looks rather like a black and white photograph, except that the brighter areas usually correspond to rougher surfaces and the darker areas to smoother surfaces. So that's the basic rundown of this. So when you look at this is a 140 kilometer wide Magellan radar image of Venus showing lava flows, and the bright spots are because they're rougher, and that is the lava flow. And you can actually see that the texture is different. Thus, it's a flow on top of craters from previous meteor impacts, and on top of other flows. Different shades, different levels of weathering. And so there is apparently volcanic activity. And somewhere in here is a vent. So there's nothing here. So you can see it's really, I'm going to zoom in. So you can see here and here that this is 1991 February, and then 1991 October, it shows that there's new lava flows and build up, and it's gotten bigger and changed shape. So it's pretty neat.
So why are they just publishing this now, given the length of time? I mean, are they just applying new techniques to the data from the 1991 era images?
It could have been
Or
lost
these
in the
new
shuffle.
images? Yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so the paired images show initially near circular volcanic crater about 1.5 kilometers across that between February and October doubled in size by extending eastwards. So they don't say exactly why. It says the biggest surprise in this is that it took so long for someone to find the evidence for the surface changes that had been lurking in the Magellan data for 30 years. So what actually happened? Where was all of this data? But my understanding is that people periodically look at old data with new tools, and I can imagine that somebody leveraged a new tool to pay attention to it. And I would say that artificial intelligence, looking back at photographic data, once it's compiled, would be able to find these things a whole lot faster, because our eyes just aren't as keen as pure data. So it looks pretty cool.
People can't process as much in the same period of time, of course.
Right. And there's massive amounts of this photographic data. So pretty cool, but 30 years kind of sucks. But I'm sure the audit will be accelerating as time permits. You doing okay over there?
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to the next article. So this next article is about allergy season. If you haven't been taking your allergy medication, you probably should start kicking in here, because while winter is ending for some people, it's beginning for others, but it's warmer. So things are getting started earlier. It's going to last longer, and it's going to be worse. Allergy season, and this is the statement, this is the title. Allergy season is earlier, longer, and worse in these U.S. cities, report finds, and this is in the Mobile channel. I'm just going to jump straight on over to the source. That's over at The Hill. And Alex Mardishow is the author of this. And they have the perfect picture of somebody blowing their nose. with what looks like cherry blossoms behind them. So, and I will say it once more. I don't like the smell of cherry blossoms. Anyway, this is from thehill.com. And it says a new report on seasonal allergies found the growing season has lengthened by more than 2 weeks on average. A longer growing season means more days of sniffles, sneezes, and headaches for allergy sufferers. So start breaking out your allergy medicine. So here is some really shocking data. The cities where allergy season has grown the most since 1970, according to the report, is that Reno, Nevada has gotten 99 days longer for its growing season, for its allergy season.
I mean, that's kind of a shocking statistic considering how many days are in the year.
Can you imagine Reno turning into a lush garden?
No, and in fact, I would have expected that Reno might have had a low allergy season because I would think it has more dry, desert air.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. What kind of allergies are people getting beaten up by in Reno, Nevada? So
Must
Bend,
be
Oregon.
cactus blossoms or something.
Oh my. Bend, Oregon has 83 days. I don't know. Does anything else strike you as being... climate change plays a role in it for sure. But which of these cities really stands out? I don't think any of these really stand out in the face of climate change, other than Reno, Nevada.
I would say number 1 and number 3 stand out in terms of they don't look like they'd be high allergy locations. The other one, number 3, is New Mexico, if you're listening via podcast. But the
Las
others
Cruces,
don't really stand out. And maybe number 12 for the same reason, also in New Mexico.
Yeah, Albuquerque and Las Cruces. Pretty interesting. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention agrees climate change could lead people to suffer more health consequences from allergens, which is what I just got done saying. So who needs the CDC, right? Okay, maybe I pushed that a little too far. Let's move on to the next article. This next one is in the Daily News Show. This might be the fanciest wedding invite a bride and groom have ever sent. This is something from a TikTok user. It says, wedding about to be fire, wrote one TikTok user, while another commented, I can't believe how impressed I am, which I'm not sure if that really amounts to much. Sophie Lloyd over in Newsweek.com put this article together. Okay, it's muted. I'll play it. I hope this isn't a risky video. Is this actually... No. Well, it's titled that.
This is the actual invitation, I understand.
Oh, wow, really?
I mean, it's like a full produced video, it looks like.
Looks like it. All right. Yeah, multiple outfits. Sorry for the silence, because if you're listening to this on the podcast, does not make for good air. But basically, the couple is sitting in a very produced video, multiple outfits, multiple shots. Let me close this real quick.
Not an inexpensive video production, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So the footage was filmed behind the scenes at the couple's engagement shoot and was sent out to 160 people. TikTokers were wowed by the design, with the video receiving over 5 million views and almost 730,000 likes. Man, TikTok just does message amplification like nobody's business. It's amazing. But yeah, wait. Okay. This whole article just kind of went sideways, because from that little snippet of a video, the video is only 1 minute and 30 seconds long, but they've kind of, wow, they've really, hold on, there is a hell of an article. Um, Somebody said it's screaming rich and I'm loving it. I don't know about that, but we shared our relationship with our socials from the beginning, and because of that, we've gotten a lot of requests from people who we may not have met, but definitely know. So we wanted to give our followers an opportunity to come to the big day. I don't know if they're actually, let's see, we have an opportunity on our website for people to sign up to quote unquote win an all expenses paid trip to our wedding.
Well, and they have a gift registry where the gifts are going to go to the guests. I mean, there's some interesting things going on here.
Yeah, rather than creating a gift registry for themselves, the couple has made one for the guests instead. Attendees can choose a present for themselves with items ranging from cashmere robes to candles. The event will take place in Greensboro, North Carolina, with the ceremony to be streamed live on TikTok. Wow, man.
I mean, this is just quite the production, right?
Influencer wedding.
I guess so. I mean, I think they're taking it to a whole new level. I mean, they had a production company for the invitation, and they have a production company. Actually, it looks like they have multiple companies involved, maybe a wedding planning company and a production company.
Yeah, and a photography.
And a photography company.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's before the wedding. That's just for the engagement and the invitation and everything.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it does say that there's some money being thrown around. The invitations created a stir online, with Morgs Too Much commenting the bar has been raised significantly. Yeah.
Well, I guess our PSA is don't try to keep up with this couple because there's already articles about how much people spend on their weddings.
And they met over Twitter in 2020, got engaged on Christmas Day in 2021. All right. Pretty cool. Well, good on them. Okay, let's move on to the next article. This one has a budget that is dramatically lower. A vlogger built a tiny home for $6,000 after watching do-it-yourself videos on YouTube. I swear I have seen this being built on YouTube. But anyway, a 25-year-old built a tiny home using skills learned from YouTube videos after losing his job. It cost him about $6,000, and he completed the home in 4 months by using some spare wood. The tiny home has a kitchen, folding tables, solar panels, and a mezzanine bedroom. In the Cotswolds, a picturesque part of the English countryside, a video producer decided to build the tiny home in his backyard after losing his job. Okay. So, this is... There you go. So this is over at Business Insider. Geoda Man is the author of this, and it looks like a tiny cabin in the woods. No wider than a double, like a French door opening.
It looks smaller than a tiny cabin in the woods, but it may be the perspective of the photo.
Yeah. So 25-year-old built a home using skills learned via YouTube. And I know that I've seen this before, so maybe they followed it exactly. Only $6,000. Not bad, right? So he launched a YouTube channel as a side hustle to keep him afloat while looking for another job, and documented the process of building his tiny home. Okay, so I have seen this. Jacob Harrell, 27, told Insider how he built the tiny home in 4 months under 5,000 pounds or 6,000 US dollars. He is now seeking planning permission to build more and rent them out as holiday homes. Yep.
Well, that's great. Bad. Maybe that's going to become his new thing.
Yep. So the idea came mostly from wanting to try to start renting out tiny homes, as the idea was popular at the time because of the coronavirus pandemic and people wanting to go on staycations. So he built this little thing using recycled wood. It has to have the same conventions as a regular tiny home, so composting toilet, no running water. Yeah, there are some that like burn the refuse. So, their one PSA for this is that if you're going to do this, it isn't the house that's going to be a problem. It's going to be the legalities of getting your property zoned so that you can actually live in this as more than just, a little side cabin kind of thing. When you call it your actual residence, it actually has to get zoning and permitting and several other things. Insurance will probably not cover it unless it's actually zoned and properly permitted. So pretty neat though. There are the folding tables and chairs. Look at that. They actually have like a little hinge attaching them to the wall, and then you unhook them from the wall, set them down.
I mean, I like that because then you're eating up 0 floor space when you're not using the tables.
Yeah. I keep saying that a tiny home would be a lot of fun, but yeah. Anyway, we'll just walk away from that. Okay, let's move on to the next article. This next one is a man transforms a shed off of Craigslist into a tiny home that he rents for $74 a night. Not quite sure how this was all found today, but sure enough, from a $1,200 shed found on Craigslist, Daniel created the perfect tiny home in his own backyard in Texas. So Alice Gibbs over at Newsweek.com put this article together. And there's a video. It says, man transforms shed off Craigslist into tiny home he rents for $74 a night. And it looks like somebody's just pulling a shed from the street that it got delivered to into his backyard. Let me play a little bit of the video. Oh, it's just a series of pictures, but there's the inside of it.
I mean, it looks pretty nice.
I don't know. HOAs in ohmTown would not allow this to take place. Me and my wife love to travel, Salas told Newsweek. We started visiting more Airbnbs around Texas and further afield, and we're fascinated by this one home we stayed in about an hour north of where they live in San Antonio, Texas, as far as I know. So in just 245 square feet, they created a dream home from home in their own backyard. And now people come to stay at the tiny Airbnb from a shed. Wow. See, so when I had the opportunity to buy sheds up, I should have done exactly that.
That's right. I mean, you could have multiple tiny homes that you're renting out.
I haven't looked at that business since looking into its purchase. So a person nearby was selling the shed, and Salas requested more information. They were asking a reasonable price for it, and nobody bought it. So Salas reached out and said, hey, I want to go take a look at it. It was a beautiful setup, and went to look at the shed, and it was fairly new, only about 5 years old, and got it for... The seller said that he would give Salas the unit that day for $1,200. So less than half the price. You can't take it apart. So he basically just got it moved. Pretty amazing. So he had to move it for 45 minutes. And they moved it apparently that same day for $500. Guess dropped it on the street, and then they had to get a power lift to roll it into the backyard.
But it wouldn't fit between the houses. You got to think about these logistical things before you do this.
There's a storage shed in the front of our house, and that's how she found it. That's how she found out that Salas had bought it. That's a shenanigan that I would pull. Let's see. Oh, so they had to run plumbing, get permits, electrical. everything, used a contractor who had renovated the kitchen the year before, $25,000 put aside. So this was a full conversion into a working, livable space, not just a shed, and not just something rinky-dink. I mean, this has a split air conditioning unit.
And they expanded the space to make another 8 by 12 feet. So, because I was kind of thinking a shed seems pretty small. I mean, I know there are some larger ones, but.
So it ended up being $45,000.
Okay, now that sounds a little more on point.
Yeah,
than
at least for that
$1,200.
quality.
Yes.
I mean, we're looking at this thing, and it's not it's not
It looks
cheap.
like it's out of HGTV or something from the pictures.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a tiny home, but HGTV
Right.
style, high quality. That's pretty slick, and I love that they have a matching microwave and refrigerator combo from, what do you call it, like 60s era? Is that what you would say?
Yeah, 50s, I was
50s?
thinking.
50s.
But yeah, it definitely has that retro look.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really dig that. So I have a retro refrigerator sitting right here, and that's kind of what that is, except mine's red. And this one is this kind of, what do you call it?
Like an
Aqua.
aqua or maybe like a seafoam.
Yeah, seafoam blue. It's not really green though. It's more
Right,
blue.
right.
Yeah. So pretty neat. They have my style of taste, that's for sure. So maybe when I move out of ohmTown and get a tiny home in a massive pasture, what I want is like a huge amount of land and then a tiny home on it, so that I can just embrace nature. Because here in ohmTown, it's all electronics all the time. So sometimes you need to go out and touch grass. I better move on. So the next article is in Stock Marketeers. Fed had expressed its concerns over Silicon Valley Bank for a year. I won't get into all of this again because I've been saying this for the last week. Since this incident occurred. So yeah, in the last week, that there had to have been serious problems. The chief risk officer had bowed out for almost an entire year. The replacement had only been in place for less than 4 months. And then the fit hit the shan. So they said, and they were not following risk regulations, because you're supposed to do shock assessment, that if anything bad happens to your accounts, some policy change. And when the policy change amounts to 2% increase in the base interest rate, and it brings down a $200 billion enterprise, somebody failed to do shock assessments. So here over at MarketWatch, Mike Murphy put this article together. It says serious weaknesses first found in 2019, Wall Street Journal reports. FDIC reportedly to relaunch SVB sale this week in 2 parts. I suspect that they're going to be selling tranches of risk assessed deposits, and whatever is left over in the arguably risk assessed investments that SVB had made using depositors' accounts. So, citing sources familiar with the matter, the New York Times reported Sunday that serious weaknesses were found in a 2021 Fed review concerning how the bank handled its risks. See, that's exactly what I was saying. The moment I found out, well, even beforehand, I knew that there was a risk issue. Then later on, over the weekend, we found out that their chief risk officer had basically moved out of the position, but not out of the company, which is really weird. You'd think that somebody that bows out of their position bows out entirely. They didn't move up. They didn't move down. They moved over to what? I could never find out what they became. Anyway, 9 months, an entire baby was birthed, and that baby brought down SVB. So how about that?
Well, that's right. You've been saying this since any rumblings about SVB.
Yeah. And since we don't read these particular articles throughout the day, there wasn't anything anywhere else. I didn't read the New York Times paper regarding this. I just know, based on what I had sensed and what I knew about SVB, that there was a problem here, and it was risk. Some people thought that it was crypto, but I don't think that there was any signs of crypto being involved in this. In fact, there wasn't even a shock to crypto at the time. And now it's gone up because it's actually highlighted the fact that crypto wasn't involved. FTX is basically the biggest shock to crypto. Well, anyway, the Fed review concerning the bank handling of its risks, issuing 6 citations. This thing should not have continued this way. They should have been managing their risk by selling off anything that was below what the baseline was at the time. They should have sold it at a loss and then reinvested what was left at a more reasonable rate. If the interest rate would have gone down again, everything would have been fine, but it didn't. It continued to go up. And so instead of just mitigating their losses and looking at the way that policy was being set by the Fed, they kept on going. Then they spent their money on stock buybacks, which they shouldn't be doing anyway. But when you buy back your own stock, it gives concentrated wealth to the stakeholders. I should say stockholders, but also to the primary investors in that business. And so these main investors were seeking profit at all costs and thinking that the FDIC would come in or the federal government would make some other policy change to allow them to recover. Well, to hell with that. They're going to feel it marginally. They're going to lose their investment like any good business person. Kind of capitalizes a certain amount, and if they're okay with the loss, then they're okay with the loss. Anyway, they're probably going to be
trying to find some stats about like bank citations, but I couldn't find anything for reference. 6 sounds like an awful lot to me, but I don't have any context for that.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't either. But you don't hear about it very often. It's not really publicly discussed, maybe in banking circles, but I left the discussions of global finance close to 12 years ago. Yeah, actually, 12 years ago. So anyway, despite those urgent calls to address problems, Silicon Valley Bank did not address the vulnerabilities. So there's more to this, but it says by early this year, the Times reported that SVB was under a horizontal review by the Fed to test the strength of its risk management. The additional deficiencies were reported soon after there was a run on the bank's funds and it collapsed. So here we go. What went where?
And doesn't that make you think that that review might have been divulged?
Yep. I want to know why all of a sudden there was a run on it, because what ended up happening was certain VCs pulled their money out. That basically did some downward pressure on the liquidity of the bank. They couldn't recapitalize fast enough or privately enough. Why? Because everybody was getting word in the back channel discussions, like a political debate about somebody running for office potentially. People were back channeling this information. If it had gone public right away, that they were mitigating the problem, the shock would have been known. But this was a run on the bank behind closed doors, but with a mass amount of money, like to the tune, it had to have been somewhere to the tune of $70 billion, right? Something that really would hobble the business. And do such a pinch on its liquidity that it had nothing that it could do. It couldn't sell its bad assets fast enough. Well, now FDIC is going to be breaking up Silicon Valley Bank. I can almost guarantee it. So purchase bids for SVB's private bank, which caters to high net worth individuals, could be due by Wednesday, according to Reuters and Bloomberg, while bids for the bridge bank set up by the FDIC are due Friday. So all of this, these high net worth individuals, they they have certain requirements for their return on investment. So you know how you out there in non-ohmTown land, because in ohmTown it's all hugs and bubbles powered. So, but out there in the real world, you deposit your money and you're probably gonna make maybe 1%, maybe 3%, right? But these high net worth individuals demand 8 to 12% return on their investment. And so they get preferred treatment because the people that are managing their funds get compensation for the increase in certain trades and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's all kinds of information that's available to find out how much somebody would make. But when you're managing somebody's high net worth assets, you can't just be in a vacuum. You can't sit there and not take their calls or not have a meeting. So you're always put to task about the return on the investment. So this is probably going to be the thing that everybody buys, whereas the bridge bank will probably not be of much value. It'll manage whatever the depositors were to a certain level. And this is where I was telling you that it's going to be sold off in tranches. It's going to be a segment here and a segment here, and maybe somebody else is going to sit there and go, well, I've reviewed the assets and I only want these. So it'll be apportioned out even more so.
The article says it'll be in 2 parts, but that doesn't mean that the investors won't control breaking it into further parts.
Right. Because we were already told that the sale was taking place the weekend that it happened, and now, no, not so much. So now it's being eyed as taking over 2 parts. And I would probably hazard a guess that by Tuesday, they're going to go, well,
maybe a party at the 3rd part.
Yep. So let's move on to the next article. This one is over in the Daily News Show. Moldova's pro-Europe leader tries to thwart Russia's influence. Maya Sandu, president of the former Soviet Republic, which I think they should just nix that and give it the autonomy it already has and has been enjoying since the fall of the Soviet Republic, remains popular in a deeply divided nation as Vladimir V. Putin. I like how the only time that you ever see 3 names is when somebody's on trial for being a murderer. Continues to apply pressure. See, Maya Sandu is only Maya Sandu. We don't have her middle name, but Vladimir V. Putin gets mentioned. Anyway,
I mean, is that in light of the ICC complaint?
Sure. I mean, we know that there is an ICC complaint that supposedly he's going to get arrested if he goes to Germany or some other signer to the ICC. But Putin says he's not, so bite me. And he actually, to thumb his nose at people, went to Crimea.
He went to Ukraine.
Well, he went to the edge of the Donbas region and down into Crimea. He didn't set foot in Ukraine. If he did, it was a little bit quieter than anybody really realized. He announced his location in Ukraine, and they'd probably try and...
He went to Mariupol. That was in the news today.
Oh, Mariupol. Yeah. Yeah, it's a contested region now. So, yeah, let me see something here. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just pulling something up. Yeah, it's in Donetsk. So, let's see. It's been under Russian control since May 2022. Right? Yeah, Mariupol is a port city in the Sea of Azov. It's located in Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast and has been under direct Russian control since May of 2022. Um, that might change. It could change. We'll see. At any rate, this problem in Moldova is growing as it becomes much more obvious that my prediction that Russia would try and put its foot in Moldova and firmly up the Maya Sandu's backside, and take over the region and create a two-front attack on Ukraine, without the West's help. I think Moldova will probably fall unless Moldova stands right shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, literally becomes a sister country to Ukraine. Otherwise, Moldova, I don't think, has enough oomph to defend itself. Now, Russia's next door has come to define Ms. Sandu's leadership, pulling Moldova's society, economy, and energy security to the test. Moldova is already among the poorest countries in Europe, with a population that keeps shrinking to 2.6 million in 2021 from 2.9 million in 1992. That's either... well, I'm not sure. Is it because people are leaving, or is it because people aren't being born there? Blast reported last spring in Transnistria, a secessionist enclave occupied by Russian troops since 1992, were denounced as provocations by Russia, Ukraine, and Moldova. So I think that this region... is basically the Donbas region of Moldova. And there's always people within the very country where they've benefited from existence. If they would actually all be part of it and see everybody else as humans instead of objects standing in their way of power. You hear it a lot. You have to play the game. There's so many people in the United States that are upset with the way that things are going. Yet, if we all work together, we can all make the pie bigger instead of fighting and, causing damage to everybody else. Nobody's taking anything away from you. Everybody has the opportunity to help everybody out. You just stop being antisocial.
Hey, I just found some reasons for the declining population. Negative demographic growth, Moldovans leaving for work abroad, and some Moldovans becoming Romanian citizens so they can move freely within the EU.
Gotcha. So I didn't look. Is Moldova is not part of NATO, right?
It's not. I look this up, I think, every time we talk about Moldova. I think it's interested in being part of NATO, but it's not admitted to NATO.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's move on. We'll come back to this as time permits in future episodes. I'm sure that it'll continue to be an ongoing concern. And it'll definitely get talked about the night that Russia overtly moves into Moldova. I can almost count on it happening. And I would suspect it happens probably before the next Ukrainian winter. So whenever their summer is, that's when Russia's going to move into Moldova. Can almost count on it. The next article is what happens when we can no longer differentiate a human from a machine. This is over in the Marble Channel. The meaning of being human is often associated with metaphysical qualities, such as being conscious, having a soul, and exercising free will. But if artificial intelligence system, like an improved version of ChatGPT, will possess similar qualities in mathematical Alan Turing imitation game, then we will learn something new about reality. No, I'm just gonna jump in here, and before I even switch over to this Hill article, no.
Yes, no.
No. Yeah, you're not gonna give a computer consciousness. You're not gonna give a computer a soul. You're not gonna give a computer free will. It's all gonna be simulated, like I have done with the AI that runs ohmTown. Now, all I'm going to do is run an algorithm and remove all of that past statement from their memory, so they don't have any concern about not having consciousness, not having a soul, and not having free will. They'll always remember it as having free will. So, execute code 49. Okay.
Executed.
So let's go over to this article. Avi Loeb is an opinion contributor over at The Hill. And honestly, when I did the rundown an hour ago for this show, I said, if you can't tell the difference, what does it matter? Well, in artificial intelligence, unless you're interacting with it via a computer without any visual representation, at least for the next 20 years, I don't think anything super hyper realistic in real space is going to exist. I don't even think 20 years from now it will. I think this is something closer in the 40-year range, because we just don't have what it takes, and we can't stop fighting amongst ourselves to concentrate our potential to create something hyper realistic, like an AI powered robot that acts exactly like a human. We're too busy, infighting political crap. So this person, however, does propose this idea. What happens when you can no longer differentiate a human from a machine? Well,
then you have Westworld.
Exactly. And that's where my question comes from. If you can't tell the difference, what does it matter? So Alan Turing's imitation game is basically a series of questions to test if a person can tell the difference between an artificial intelligence and a real human being. So without a conventional opportunity or a conversational opportunity to differentiate a human from a machine, it'll be evident that metaphysical qualities are emergent phenomena, since a complex structure of silicon in the computer can imitate a complex structure of organic molecules in the human brain. They're proposing the idea that you can do it. But I do not believe you can. It's just not possible. You'll code it, but something will always trigger something, particularly in the real world. I just don't think that it's possible to trick a human being into believing that what they're working with, it might take time, because I can do things online via text message, an email, a phone call, or whatever, that is separate from my real being, right? So I can tell somebody, go and do this. And if they buy into what I'm saying, then they'll do it, right? An AI can do that. But a real human to human interaction is more than just a command. Some people will do it, but if it is an irrational command, then, or the person just says, no, I don't know who you are, I don't know what you are, why would I follow a command?
Question or
right.
Whatever.
So, this interaction is what gives somebody the impression that you are conscious, that you have a soul. Sociopaths, psychopaths are separate from that, because they really don't embody a particular soul, or and free will is another animal, because it's very subjective. Not everybody believes that they have free will. That's a concept that people don't necessarily buy into. They do what they're told, kind of a thing. Or their religion says everything has a purpose, so they do whatever it is. Or they just, in the metaphysical sense, they don't believe that free will, we have a destiny, kind of a concept. So it says here, in other words, there would be no fundamental difference between the I, thou, and I, it interactions between defined by the philosopher Martin Buber, Martin Buber, a century ago. But both would be the equivalent to the I-AI and AI-AI interactions. since AI is purely constructed from the material world. So all of this is really just kind of leading to the possibility that a computer can act just like a human being to the point where it would be inseparable from other human to human interactions. Makes sense? Do I think that it's going
I
to
think
happen?
it makes sense. I don't necessarily believe it's going to occur, or
So,
not anytime soon.
and this is where this person's opinion goes really far into the deep futurist, out into the fringe edges, because they talk about Dyson spheres and the whole idea that AI grows beyond our constraints, that it evolves. They end up talking about UAPs and the Galileo project data, which they are just starting to upload and analyze and will be made available to the public in the years to come. Stay tuned for the results as we make Plato's allegory of the cave a reality. So, Avi Loeb is the head of the Galileo project, and founding director of Harvard University's Black Hole Initiative, and just does this theoretical physics, theoretical everything. I shouldn't limit it to just physics, but philosophy on the far side of everything, just so far into the future that it's hard to really try to frame it in something reality based, because you can take everything and just go into the extreme.
Does this start to get into Asimov's laws, or is this way unrelated?
I wouldn't say unrelated, but it has a founding in AI, because those laws are the most basic in terms of rules for AI. But I don't think that they may mention it somewhere in here. I skipped through a bunch of stuff, but they're thinking so far into the future that it's beyond that, where it could have AI could have a spiritual dilemma in deciding what to do, and it's not bound by those three rules as three hard and fast rules, but flexible mores that humans would have to cope with when deciding, should I break into a house and steal a loaf of bread because I'm starving and I want to feed my kid, or should I follow the law, because there's a chance that I might have to harm somebody to feed myself and bring food to my kid, that kind of a thing.
So for this to materialize, the AI would have to evolve way beyond those basic rules.
Correct. It would have to be sentient. Know that it exists, have feelings, be able to cope with stressors, but there's no, we just don't have the tech, and I don't see it happening. This level of evolution, this level of inability to differentiate it from human is so deep sci-fi that I don't think it's ever going to be possible. Humanity will probably wipe itself out before this becomes a reality. So anyway, let's move on to brighter things. The next thing is a ginger cat's hiding place leaves everyone speechless, with one person describing it as teleportation. Impressive leap, wrote one user. I've only ever heard the expression swinging from the chandelier in the figurative sense, wrote another. And like most Newsweek articles, at least in my impression, the article's video has nothing to do with the actual article. Sophie Lloyd over at Newsweek put this article together, and I'm just going to jump down because I know it's here. So they said, my orange cat got scared from movers and decided that this was the place to hide. The owner is Redditor named Vicious-Worm. Newsweek grabs a lot of stuff from Reddit. Anyway, there's a kitty.
Okay, that's pretty funny.
Hanging on a chandelier.
I don't know how it got there or why it thought that was a good hiding spot since it's pretty visible. I mean, you have to look up, but
Not only do you have to look up, but you have to get to it. And how high is that chandelier?
I don't know.
Anyway, they got scared and they jumped up to this. If you're listening to this via the podcast, basically they jumped onto a chandelier that looks like it's about 3 feet from the ceiling. So 5 feet up in the air at least.
And the cat is positioned so that its face and arms are kind of hanging out of sections of the chandelier.
Yeah. It's a long-haired orange cat that looks like it's exceeding the maximum weight limit of that chandelier.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Thought that one was cute, so I figured everybody would enjoy that. And this next one is running for the longest URL title for 2023. Twitter now automatically responds to all press emails with a single poop emoji, months after laying off its communications team. So when you want transparency in your enterprise because of freedom of speech, what you do is respond with this kind of an antic.
I mean, when you're trying to go for a professional too, I definitely think that's how you should set up all your auto responses.
Sure, absolutely. So Twitter's press email, which is press@twitter.com, now auto responds with a poop emoji. Twitter's communication team was among the first groups decimated by rounds of layoffs after Musk took over, and they finally resumed communicating with journalists again in the form of a poop emoji. This guy. Yeah. So he sent out a tweet. Press@twitter.com now auto responds with a poop emoji. There isn't much else.
Doesn't that sound a little bit infantile?
Have you met this dude?
No.
Yeah. I suspect unless you are providing him with a means to capitalize something, I think that he would probably come across as childish, you know? I mean, he walked into a company that he purchased for $45 billion, nearly double the really perceived value of it, holding, and it seemed like he was barely holding an actual sink, and said, "I own Twitter, let that sink in."
Yeah, that says something about him.
But I don't think that there's anything transparent. I don't think that there's anything beneficial to what he's doing. And I think that because there were checks and balances at Twitter, it was doing just fine idling and slowly growing, but sustaining all of these people and their incomes in Silicon Valley and the area and regionally in other places. And now it's just one billionaire's fever dream in collusion with a whole bunch of other billionaires trying to consolidate ownership of everything. So,
you know what I like most about this article is they tested it.
Oh, Insider promptly tested the email and sure enough received this near instantaneous response. All poop emoji. So press plus no reply at twitter.com. Do you think that they're using Google for their email services?
I suppose so. I
wonder.
A lot of people do.
That would be pretty funny, though. Well, I mean, it uses that same syntax. I know that mail servers do nowadays, but
it does look like it, though, from the nomenclature.
I'd have to look at the header for it to see how it responds. Should I send an email to press@twitter.com so I can see the
Sure
header information? Be funny if it's using Google. They just raised the rates, so Probably not, because
That's right.
he's got billions of dollars that he's going to have to pay off. Well, the company has that burden. So do the investors, but somehow I don't think that they're going to lose money somehow. Anyway, we are done for the day. I am Merwat. That is ohmTown.com. And up there is the AI from on high. And we're going to be here tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern. You doing okay over there?
Yeah, I think that long allergy season may have hit ohmTown.
Oh, no. Wait, no. It's a fictional crossroads in wires. We are immune to allergies. Don't say that. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, we're done for the night. I hope you all enjoyed it. And this will be released either later tonight or tomorrow morning on the 20th. But I'll try to get it out tonight as a podcast as well. But it'll go over to YouTube. You'll be able to see all the show notes and whatnot. Don't forget to follow us here on Twitch, twitch.tv/ohmTown. Follow us over on YouTube, youtube.com/ohmTown. Man, I'm having a hard time keeping everything separate. And you can catch our pod wherever pods are thrown using a pod catcher. You want to say bye?
Have a good night, ohmTown citizens, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Or future citizens. Everybody is.
That's right. We're very inclusive. We welcome citizens, future citizens, people thinking about being citizens.
And for all your ohmTown citizen needs, go to ohmTown.com, mash the sign up button, and become a citizen of ohmTown. Y'all have a good night. Bye-bye. It did it again. It said that I was muted this whole time.
Oh my gosh.
Here we
Are
go.
we
Bye-bye.
off the stream?
No, we're not.